Right, this is where things start to get interesting. So far we've really just been playing with the user interface, dragging and dropping elements in, and then customizing them a little bit. Where the real magic starts to happen is when you're writing code. And as you may remember from the first video in this section, we do that in viewcontroller.swift. So this is a Swift file full of Swift code which controls the view, which you hopefully remember is a way of referring to the screen, the elements that are being displayed on the screen. So first off, let's quickly run through this default code that we've got here and make sure that we understand what it's doing. Bear in mind, you don't need a complete understanding of all of this right now. A lot of it is actually quite subtle and complex, and while you will definitely understand it by the end of the course, at the moment, take things one step at a time, and if anything is not entirely clear, my advice would be to run with it, safe in the knowledge that you will understand it later on. Having said that, it's always good to be as clear as possible on how these things work, so let's kick off. So first off, we've got this green section up here, which are simply comments. So anything with a double slash in front of it will turn green in Xcode, and you can essentially write whatever you want after that, and that's just a way for you to provide messages for yourself or someone else who might be reading your code later to explain what's going on. Nice and easy. Next, we've got this line, import UIKit. So if we type the import command, that allows us to import a whole range of different frameworks. So if, for example, I type an A, you can see it's suggesting a range of different modules for us. So we've got ARKit, which is the new augmented reality kit, which we'll be looking at later on in the course, and a bunch of other things. There's a huge number of different modules that we can add, which are mostly self-explanatory. So we've got messages, for example, GameKit, social. You can get a rough idea of what they do. Essentially, they add a whole load of other functions that we can then use in our code if we need to. But if we don't need them, then they're not included, which keeps our apps small and fast. So the only module that we're using in this app is UIKit. And as you might imagine, that allows us to interact with the user interface. So that's all that line is doing. Next, we're creating a class, which is essentially a chunk of code which contains a collection of functions and variables, which generally speaking have something in common. We'll be looking at classes in a lot more detail in the next section, so don't worry about them too much, but think of them for now as a collection of code. Now this class is called viewController, and it has a type UI viewController. So this colon here defines the particular type of class that we're creating. So UI viewController, fairly self-explanatory. It allows us to control the view. Now inside this class, you can see the class is delineated by those curly brackets there. This indicates the beginning of the class, and this one at the end is the end of the class. We've got two methods or functions, which are once again chunks of code that are run at a certain time. Now methods are created with the keyword func, short for function, and this first one is called viewDidLoad. So remember, once again, the view is what is appearing on the screen, so this function will run when the view is loaded. So when everything, all our labels and our buttons are appearing on the screen. Method names tend to have parentheses after them. Some methods have extra options which you might define in these parentheses, but these two functions that we've got here do not. We've also got this keyword override here. That's because the viewDidLoad method already exists in the viewController class. It's defined by the operating system iOS itself, and we are just adding, or if we want to, we can add code to it here. So we're not creating the function, we're just adding code to it, we're overriding it. That's what that override command means. And again, just like the class, this viewDidLoad method is contained within those curly brackets there. So this is the start of the method, and this is the end of it. And at the moment, we've only got one command in our viewDidLoad method, and that is super.viewDidLoad. This super stands for a superclass, which is another type of class that again we'll look at later on. If you really want to know what they do now, feel free to go and Google what is a superclass, but I personally think at this point that will probably confuse you more than will help, so just trust that you will understand it by the end of the course. And for now, all you really need to know is that this chunk of code called viewDidLoad will be run when the user interface elements that we've created onto the view is displayed. And then finally, we've got a quite similar looking function or method called didReceiveMemoryWarning, and this is exactly what you might think. So this method is run whenever a memory warning is received. Hopefully we won't get any of those. We're building fairly basic apps at the moment, so we shouldn't be hitting any memory warnings, but this allows you to deal with the memory warning and perhaps remove items from the memory if you need to. Okay, so that's what this boilerplate code is doing. Once again, if there was anything that you were not entirely clear on, don't worry. It's early days yet, and this is actually quite complicated code that we're working with here. We're actually just going to write one little command, and this command is going to print something to the logs. So remember here, down here we've got the logs, so we've got a bunch of default messages that Xcode is giving us, but we can also create messages down there by ourselves. And this is very simple. We use the command print, and that will print something to the logs. And as I say, with method names, we put parentheses after them. So print, and then this particular method, the print method, does take a value, and that value is whatever we want to print. So if I want to print hello world, for example, I would use double quotes like that or speech marks, and inside those speech marks I write hello world. So this command prints to the logs down here the string or text hello world. So try that out. Let's run it, and with any luck, when the app is loaded, we should see hello world in the logs, and there it is. Superb. So I hope you tried that. I'm just going to give you a super quick challenge to make sure you've got this idea. Let's delete that line that we just wrote, and the challenge is to write a similar line which simply displays your name in the logs rather than hello world. Very simple. Give it a go. Good luck. All right, hope that went well. You should have been able to just type print and then a pair of speech marks and your name. So for me, that's Rob, and then I'm just going to run it and make sure that works as expected. There we go. All right, so that was your first bit of Swift, and very, very simple. So as you can see, we're just entering a simple command which prints a particular collection of characters, in this case our name, to the logs. All right, so might be slightly underwhelming, but that is the beginning of a lot of computing power. So allowing our name to appear in the logs is nice for us, but it's not actually any good for the user because they can't see the logs. They can only see what's on their screen. So in the next video, we'll see firstly how to interact with this button here, so to do something when that button is pressed, and secondly, how to actually make something appear on the screen when the user presses that button.